Okay, hey guys. I couldn't record the 9.2 lesson today, due to me having to switch between Desmos and the Smart Notebook. But I could do a little recording here, and because I assume you guys are gonna want a little help on the project or references for the project, and you are probably gonna go back to that 9.2 video, which doesn't exist. So instead, I'm making this one to help for the project. So you can find our project right here at the top of our Google Classroom, right? Chapter 9 project, and I have the due date up there. Um, Students will create a design in the polar coordinate system using polar equations. Using a graphing calculator, TI-84, you have that app. Inspire is a type of calculator, Desmos.com, which I highly recommend Desmos.com. I think that'll be the easiest one for everybody and the way to make it look the nicest. Students will experiment on their own with different equations until they get an aesthetically pleasing design. Students must include at least three polar equations, two of which need to be classical curves, those being rhos, a lemniscate, a limson, a cardioid, and a spiral of Archimedes in their design. Students may use additional equations in their design as well, and students will turn in a copy of their design, the graph, a typed list of the equations used, the window settings used, and a brief 100-word type description of why they chose the equations they did and what they found pleasing about the design. The project will be completed on poster board. If you are full-time remote, um, a Google Slides will be okay, or a presentation. And then down here, projects that are not typed will not be accepted. Okay, so per my recommendation, I would probably head to Desmos because Desmos is super nice with this. Now, first, to get it into a polar graph, you need to hit this little wrench in the top right, and then the polar graph is right here, these little circles under the grid. Okay, and then to start doing polar equations, you can just type R equals, and we can start typing equations. Now, um, here are the classical curves that I said we at least need two of, right? But we need at least three equations total. You could use three classical curves. They don't have to be different classical curves. You could do a mix of the same ones and make it look pretty that way. It really just depends on what you're feeling, right? This is a project totally up to you in terms of which of these you use. You just need two of them, right, of some kind, and then a third polar equation at least, um, and maybe some more after that. So again, the idea is to get an aesthetically pleasing design. It's not to just throw stuff on a page and then say, "Oh, there's an equation, there's an equation, there's an equation, turn it in." It's supposed to not look like nothing, right? Or it's supposed to look like you intentionally made it look nice. And so that's where the 100-page type, or not 100-page, 100-word typed thing comes in. You have to tell me what you found pleasing about the design. Because if you just put random stuff down and it kind of looks like a bunch of nothing, um, then is that really an aesthetically pleasing design? Probably not. But maybe just to get started, I want to get one of those. One of my classical curves down, so I know I have one. And maybe I'll just start with one of the classic rose curves. Um, so I'm gonna go back to Desmos, and let's do a rose curve. So cosine, and then to type in theta, you literally just type the word out, Theta, and it'll put it right there for you. Now the rose curves, we can do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We can kind of see the pattern, right? The odds, that's the number of rose petals. The evens, it doubles. Maybe I'll do 8. And then that looks kind of small. I could either zoom in or I could simply make that a little bigger. I think making it look a little bigger looks nice. Okay. Maybe that's good for now. And then, kind of like I did earlier, maybe I want to do a spiral of Archimedes. And maybe that looks good to some of us. Maybe I want to like cover it. Maybe that's what looks pleasing to me. Maybe I want to cover it. So zero point 0.2, maybe 0.23. That looks good, right? That kind of perfectly covers it. And maybe I want the colors to sort of match. Maybe I don't want the same color, but maybe I want like a color scheme. So maybe I'll hold left click here. Maybe orange will look good with red. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. So maybe that's a starting place, and then maybe I just want to experiment a little bit, right? Like, or what does tangent look like? Well, that's kind of boring. I think maybe what happens if I put some? Oh, well, maybe if I put some things here, this looks a little crazier, right? Um, what happens if I do tangent and then maybe I minus sine or something? Oh, then we get some weird stuff here. What happens if I start putting? Oh, starts distorting it a little bit. Um, what if I also minus a cosine? Maybe just get crazy. Okay. Um, maybe I'll match them all. Ooh, and that makes some weird things. So maybe after seeing that, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm gonna take away that, and I like this swirl here, but now I want to add something else. Maybe I don't want as many of those curves. Um, hmm, maybe only three or five. Maybe they're kind of odd, but I kind of don't like how that overlaps. Maybe we'll go back just having all eight. Um, or maybe I don't like this tangent design, so I'm gonna go back to R cos theta, and I kind of liked that. Oh, I like the purple actually too, so maybe we'll keep that. Let's try something else. What are some other things? What does the natural log of theta look like or something? Oh, that looks kind of like the spiral of Archimedes. So maybe I don't want to overlap that. Let's maybe do a limison. So, if you have trouble knowing what they need to be, right? Maybe here I'm going to try a limison. So, um, either sine or cosine. So I wonder what will look better if I do like 3 plus cosine of theta. Maybe I put like a 2 there, or maybe I kind of want the loops, right? Maybe I'll do 5. The way I kind of like 5 because then it ends at the 8 where the rose petals end. Ooh, and then what would happen if I do 3 minus 5 cosine theta? Ooh, and that puts it on the other side. Maybe that'll do something, right? And then maybe I can make these both um, orange or something. So make those both orange. And maybe that's a pleasing design to me, right? And um, then maybe I can set my windows to, it looks like the farthest it goes out is 8, so maybe I'll go 8 on both sides to get as full screen as I can. And there we go. And maybe this would be my pleasing design, right? And this has, at least three uh, classical curves. Now, this is just an example, and all that talking I did, like, I know how everything looks, but the point is I was trying to mimic, like, you experimenting with what some of these look like, right? So, um, right, or what they do if you add minuses or other stuff in there, and maybe you do some crazy things like r equals the cosecant of theta. What does that look like? Oh, well, that's just I don't know what that is. What happens if I start adding? Oh, right, like what happens if I add a bunch of these? Oh, I bet something can be made pretty cool out of that design right there, right? And then maybe what happens if I put a ooh, negative makes it smaller. This will push it out a little bit. Okay. Right? Like you can experience with these. Now, ones like this, while they look cool and can contribute to a cool design, they aren't one of the classical curves, which is fine. You just have to make sure you have at least two of the classical curves in there, right? So I don't want to do too much on my own to give away or take away any designs that someone may come up with. It's really all up to you. Your window settings are these right here. Basically, your X and your Y's, right? Um, and that should be good for the project. The rest is just following the directions.